I do show how in the Gospels the theme of election pops up at very critical places. I've already alluded to the Transfiguration and the reference to the Old Testament. He is that elect servant through whom this gospel blessing of God's saving grace will come to all the nations and peoples. I illustrate how in an almost, call it natural way, our Lord's language expresses his familiarity with and obvious embracing of the teaching of the Old Testament regarding Israel's election. Even in the well-known discourse in Matthew 24, the situation that he describes in the period between his coming first and coming again is a period of difficulty and of testing, and so much so that if it were possible, even the elect would fall away, but not, he's obviously assuming that,
it's not possible.
Implying that that's not possible. You find that kind of language sprinkled through the Gospels. And now this isn't a text that actually uses the language of election, but even the Great Commission has broadly in view the language of Psalm 2, God's purpose to give to his Son as his rightful inheritance, those among the nations who belong to him and whom he as the Father will call. I do quite a bit with the Gospel of John, by the way, in my which I think is a very significant gospel on the theme of election, even though the language of election is not often used.
But the high priestly prayer, for example, would not function without election.
Exactly. And the language of regeneration, chapter 3, even in chapter 1, not by any human will, but by God granting that new birth. Do people believe and respond in faith to the gospel message? I think even John 3:16 in its own way has implicitly behind it the notion of God's good purpose. All the discourses in the Gospel of John, those whom the Father gives me, and for whom I lay down my life, John 10, the Good Shepherd discourse, the high priestly prayer, John 17. Though Karl Barth's exegesis, in my opinion, of John 1, the prologue, is speculative and unsatisfactory, he's not entirely wrong to go as he does to the Gospel of John for the theme of election. Now you find it in the Catholic epistles as well, even 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, an elect.
The elect lady.
And there are other passages in the epistles, pastoral, 1st, 2nd Timothy.
And Peter too. Peter is tremendous in terms of his understanding of ecclesiology and election, using a lot of themes from Exodus and 1 Peter. It's definitely there. And when we see the New Testament's use of the Old, it even draws it into further contrast. Election is not just an incidental subject. It's really part of the warp and woof, or the fabric, really, of the Bible, that God has chosen a people unto himself.